Tonight on A Second Look, we remember the Mercury 7 astronauts as we celebrate the 55th anniversary this month of NASA's news conference to introduce them to the country. Gordon Cooper was one of the 7, and while his role as an astronaut drew him fame early in his career, it was his comments about UFOs that drew attention later in his life. Cooper said that in 1955 at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California, test pilots saw a saucer-like aircraft fly overhead and then land in a nearby dry lake bed. 30 years later, he said the government was covering up its knowledge of UFOs and told a United Nations panel that the world needed a top-level panel to collect and evaluate data about UFOs. And he's not the only experienced pilot to have seen something they couldn't explain. KTVU's Tom Vakar brought us this report in 2002.
Los Altos resident Neil Daniels was a United Airlines pilot for 35 years. And one March night in 1977 near Syracuse, New York, Daniels, in command of a DC-10 jumbo jet, says he had a real-life close encounter with something.
And there was this very, very bright, white, brilliant light off to the wingtip. It affected the compasses on the airplane, so it was a magnetic force or some kind of energy that we don't understand. Both the co-pilot looked at it, and the flight engineer got out of his seat and took a look out the window, and air traffic control said, United 94, what are your intentions? And it took off and disappeared to our rear and off at, say, the 8 o'clock position. Everything returned to normal, and we went on in and landed.
And just as in Close Encounters, Daniels' crew, fearing ridicule, did not officially report it. 6 months later, Daniels says he spoke privately with his boss.
So I told him, and he said, well, I'm certainly sorry to hear that. And I said, why? And he says, well, bad things happen to pilots that have sightings.
Daniels says he never mentioned it again until after he retired. Nonetheless, pilots do see unknown things. Linda Connell is director of NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System based at Moffett Field. It's a place where pilots can report mistakes, close calls, and other incidents without jeopardizing their licenses.
Yes, we do get reports of sightings. It's very difficult from our position to untangle it, because there's so many things you have to consider when you're looking at what would be called UFOs.
NASA directed us to this man, Richard Haines, a retired NASA scientist who for 30 years specialized in studying pilots.
In general, they are subject to the same kinds of visual illusions that anyone else is, of course, human beings. But having said that, it's been my experience that pilots are remarkably good observers.
Haines, author of 7 books, is now chief scientist of NARCAP, the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. The nonprofit research group does not even use the term UFO. Instead, it studies UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and takes confidential pilot reports of UAP sightings.
Only about 25% of pilots will make a report of something that they can't identify. And we've identified almost 100 cases now worldwide where during a close encounter with the phenomenon, whatever it is, some part of the aircraft avionics system goes haywire.
Most reports can ultimately be explained as weather, other natural phenomena, or secret government aircraft.
When we were developing the stealth bomber, pilots knew that was going on. They'd seen it.
But there's a residual of perhaps 20% or 30% of the total reports that just can't be explained in some natural way.
And some of those cases are strange indeed.
I have cases where the phenomenon comes down and hovers over the runway of a major airport and blocks the landing traffic so that the tower instructs the planes to either do a go-around or to go to an alternate. And I have reason to believe that our Air Force and Space Command have been collecting sensed data of anomalies going on that they're not telling us about.
And that's it for this week's Second Look. I'm Frank Somerville. We'll see you again next week.